Sabrina, I have a super important question for you to start this off that I think a lot of men are wondering.
Okay.
How do we find the clitoris? Where is it?
Oh my God. You had me nervous. Oh my God.
I wanted to catch you by surprise with that one. Thank you so much for joining me. Studying to be a sex therapist. That's why I asked the question. I wasn't trying to be creepy for those listening, but I appreciate you joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I guess the first thing, first of all, found you on TikTok. So you're on my roster now of people who I admire on TikTok and love their channel and who actually want to be on this podcast with me. So I think it's super cool. So after Sex Ed, right off the bat, if you haven't checked it out, go follow Sabrina on TikTok after Sex Ed because it's super awesome. Did you expect when you first posted your video on TikTok about whatever you were talking about sex related that it was going to sort of blow up in a way?
No, like zero. I started posting stories on Instagram and on my personal account. And stories disappear after a day, and it was stuff that I was learning in school. And I just had so many friends saying, this is really fun. This is really funny. It's interesting. Why don't you do something, make reels and I was like, is that where you dance and you point? Like, I just can't do that. And then so many other people I knew that were sex educators and people in my program, because I was studying sexual health, were starting TikToks. And I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. It was actually part of our program too, was to make a quick video, 2 minutes, and try to take a complicated concept and parse it and make it simple. And our teachers were like, why don't you try TikTok? Anyways, I threw some videos up and I thought it was going to just be my friends looking at it. And I was like, I don't understand what this is. Like, what is this? Like, people were sharing it and liking it. And so, no, I didn't anticipate. I was not prepared. I'm still not.
And now you're everyone's sex ed teacher, whether you like it or not. I find it interesting. So, you're talking about how quickly it sort of blown up and people were sharing it and people were finding it so fascinating. Mm-hmm. And I'm so interested in that because when it comes to sex ed, especially as like kids, and I'm in Ontario, so, woefully lacking in sexual education as a kid, what, I don't know if you even have a great answer for it, but like, the dynamic of people, there seems to be an appetite that people want to learn about sex and learn a lot of deeper sex, yet we're not taught it at all. And we're still in a way, sort of society, like in society, not allowed to talk about it in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know. What's going on there?
What's the deal?
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay. Oh, you know what? Hold on a second. Can you hear that?
No.
My furnace, okay, because I'm in the basement, so this is where I do all my work. It's perplexing because I don't even know where to start. There is such an appetite for it, and I always considered myself a sex positive person, even though I didn't really understand. I didn't understand what that was exactly. It just conceptually, I was like, I think I'm a sex positive person. I'm non-judgmental. I'm a good listener. Like. Nothing to be ashamed of kind of stuff. And then, I thought, I guess people are just not like that. And I might be alone in that, or maybe that's the kind of company I keep, generally tend to be these sex positive people. But the more, again, like blowing up on TikTok and people asking all these questions and parents saying like, I want to have good conversations with my kids, and husbands and wives saying, I want to have a better sex life with my spouse. Everybody wants to talk about this. So, I mean, from a political perspective, you're saying sex ed is woefully lacking in Ontario. It is. It got better and then it got worse, as you know. Like it was, we got Ford and he went back to the 1998 curriculum. And, from an academic perspective, we looked at studies into sex ed curriculum, polls, surveys, especially in Ontario, like how were parents feeling about it? How were kids feeling about it? What was their read on the content? Like, were they apprehensive about some issues? Did they not want these things included? I think what was so shocking in our classes was that it was like 90th percentile parents we're comfortable with a wide variety of topics: homosexuality, sexuality being on a spectrum, consent, masturbation, orgasm, things like, they were like fine. And it was something like 94%, like, don't pin me down, it was like 90th percentile. And then kids, again, 90th percentile, wanted this content. So then I remember being in class, or like talking to my classmates and being like, the kids want it, the parents want it, what the hell is the problem? And I think it's just an easy way to score political points. I think it's just, it's scare tactics, like, oh, you're going to learn about, sexuality, being diverse, being on a spectrum, there's all these variations, so it's going to make your kid confused and not understand who they are, and then people get really nervous, and the truth is that they don't really have a great sex education either, so they don't have the tools or the language to be like, that's wrong, you're not going to do that. Like, they're just going to talk to my kids about, consent and understanding their bodies and understanding their identity. And anyways, all that to say, I just think that sex continues to be this really taboo topic. I find it perplexing some of the time, and then other times I'm like, no, like when you're saying, do I expect to blow up? But no, I didn't at all. But then when I kind of zoom out, it's so not surprising. Like, it doesn't shock me because people don't really have anybody to talk to, and it's fucked up. So did I answer your question?
Yeah,
I don't even think I did.
It was a great answer. And, I know it's a lot sort of worse in more Republican conservative states. Down south, you have a lot of conversation about, gender affirming care and all that stuff. And don't worry about it. It's all good. Okay. We're having camera issues, technology.
We're not touching it. Okay.
But, in Ontario, while we have this great sort of percentage, I think we sort of play to those scare tactics a little bit. Yeah. Like you said, and like, especially conservative politicians really sort of, it's like an online thing. It's like not even like grounded in reality. Pushing that aside, I'm very curious, how does one sort of fall into or want to get into this subject for like a profession? Yeah. What made you want to be a sex therapist?
So I'm studying to be a sex therapist. I teach sex ed now, with a charity. What made me want to be it? I've always had this very genuine curiosity and fascination with sex. Like, I thought to some degree, everyone's like, it finds it very interesting and very fascinating, but I can't get enough of learning about it. And I realized that at a really young age. Do you remember the Sunday Night Sex Show with Sue Johansson?
I never watched it, but yeah, I know who you're talking about. Okay.
Well, it started as a radio show, and that, like, I'm dating myself. I was so young. I think I was like in grade 6 when it came out. And none of my friends were allowed to listen to it. But I didn't really come from a censored household. I didn't come from a liberal household either, though. My mom just didn't care. Like, she was like, do whatever you want. And I would listen to the Sunday Night Sex Show, and I would like take notes. And then I would go to school on Monday, and I would just tell everybody, like, this is what I learned. Like, this is, and none of that was covered in class. We didn't learn any of that. Just this like really, like, insatiable appetite to learn as much as I could. And then now that I have some perspective, and it's been like years that I've been teaching it on and off, but I've been teaching sex ed for about 10 years now. Like, the questions that you get about sex, like gender, like boy, girl, man, like gay, straight, old, young, doesn't matter. They can really be broken up into 2 categories. And one is, how do I do whatever? And that's like a checklist. That's like, how do I put a condom on? How do I masturbate? How do I, use a tampon or give a girl an orgasm? They want check, check, check. And then there's, am I normal? And and I feel like I lived in am I normal for such a big chunk of my adolescence, and I know what that feeling feels like. And I truly in my heart believe that everybody knows that. Everybody's lived there. And I think that's why I have this really big pull towards it. Like, it's so lonely to think like, is anybody else like me? Does anybody else think like I do? Is anybody else doing these things that I'm doing? And then when you like muster up the courage to just ask somebody, it's like pretty much, yeah, everybody's feeling the same things you are, generally speaking. Everybody's got so much in common, and that shame that you feel about whatever, thinking about sex, or maybe thinking about the same sex, or like anything. At some point I realized, like, I learned that, like, I don't think I was born to be so ashamed of this stuff. And that's what really made me want to be an educator, was that I'm not so drawn to the how do I do stuff, like, and I can talk about that, but I'm more drawn to the am I normal, because I wanted to know that, and I really want to help people that get stuck there, and you can live there for a really long time, and sex is so taboo that can go on for years. You know what I mean? What was your question? How does somebody get involved?
Yeah.
I think, to sum it up really quickly, I think that people that get involved in sex education, sex therapy, sex anything, and if anybody has any interest in it, you're going to have to be a really good listener. It doesn't matter what kind of anything you have to do with sex, high levels of empathy. And I think I generally tend to be a very empathetic person, and that's what pulled me in that direction. Was like, I'll listen. Like, I don't like the idea of people suffering, thinking like, I'm so weird, when you're not. Like, you're probably not,
Yeah. I say this a lot on this podcast, and to the reference of a lot of things, but it always sort of applies, because I come from this sort of small white town where, like I said, I didn't get any sex education really. Didn't I remember the first time when I was about to lose my virginity, I was like, I don't know what to do, so you're gonna have to like put it in and figure it out from there. Like, that's how that was, like, to the point of just like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And that's sort of what you meant, like, the checklist. But then as I've gotten older, and I've made friends with women and people in the LGBTQ community, and people who explore polyamory, or different sort of open relationships, or kink, it's sort of like broadened my perspective to all these different things. And when you come to that question of what is normal, I mean, I think everything almost in a sense is normal to a particular community, or you can find that community. So I'm curious, when we talk about that, what is normal, what are some examples, or maybe like the most frequently asked questions when it comes to, am I normal? Is this normal, this thing that I'm experiencing?
I would say for kids, like talking to adolescents, like the am I normal really is like watching porn, getting aroused by porn, like are other people doing that? And then like the content of the porn, like a lot of questions I get, like if you're saying like, I don't know how to do it, like you're gonna have to put it in. Like the questions that I get from kids like really often are like, do people, like, are people laughing when they have sex? Do people make mistakes? Like, does everyone just know what they're doing? And I would say that's the am I normal is there. Like, am I going to know how to do that? Like, no, it's awkward. It's going to be awkward. And the only way you're going to know is to talk to somebody, like, or to talk to the person that you're sleeping with, or you're intimate with. The am I normal really for adolescents, I feel like they're so lost. You know what I mean? And you're inundated with sexual imagery just about everywhere. So, people are like, okay, well, I'm thinking about sex, but some of the images I'm seeing are like really aggressive, and I'm not like that. Like, is that normal? Or, there's lots of kids that tell me they don't think about sex all that much, and they have no interest in porn. And we have to remember those kids too, that are like, I have no interest in, casual hookups or anything. Am I normal? Like, so when you don't talk about sex at all, you screw up all different kinds of people, because the messages that they're getting are like, it's not nuanced, it's not rich. You know what I mean? There's no discussion or dialogue. I'd say that's adolescents. And then like older people, at least like the way that it's really blown up on TikTok, because I teach sex ed to adolescents, to kids and teenagers, but I'm studying sex therapy, so that's a little bit more adult. And it is more adult. So I would say the am I normal adults are like people that have lost their sex drive, are like, I've been with my husband and wife for like 10, 5, 10, 20 years. And like, we just like don't do it that much. Like, am I normal? I'm like, yeah, like you have ups and downs and ebbs and flows and all different kinds of things can impact your drive. When people like message me on TikTok and say like, oh, I lost my drive, but like, I lost my job and then my dad died and now we haven't done it in a year. It's like, what do you think? Like, do you think that those things aren't connected? Do you know what I mean? So the answer to the question is, yeah, I feel like it varies by group, but I would say for kids, it's really like really wanting somebody to translate what sex is, like, because they get so many messages from movies and music and porn and stuff, and they're like, somebody translate, am I normal, like, if I don't want to do that, or like, do I have to behave a certain way? And then like the older people are like, I don't think about sex 24/7. Am I okay? Like, yeah, you're fine. And like, anyways, that's a whole other thing. Like, just the definition of sex has no nuance. You know what I mean? Like, stuff like that. But anyways.
Yeah, it's there's a couple of things I took out from that. But I'll start with sort of like the adolescence, because I think a lot of us, even my age, I'm 30 now. So as I was growing up, I didn't really have the internet until I was like 16, 17. So like, we weren't really consuming porn at a super early age. But now I look at obviously kids today, like you can have access to porn like as soon as you want it on your iPad, whatever. And I think, but even for someone like myself and my age group, we learned a lot about sex from watching porn. And as I started getting older and, started becoming more sexually active with different partners, there seemed to be like almost an expectation. And I'm only strictly speaking of, man-woman relationships here, like hetero sex, of course, but that it was like, almost like you do doggy style, do a couple pumps, you're done in 30 seconds. And above that, any sort of attention to particularly the woman was like really like seen as like, wow, you would do like, you do that, like what? Like, it's so interesting. And so, as you're talking to these kids, like, do you sort of find that what they're learning is from porn, and then when it sort of breaks the mold of like this, like, women aren't like screaming being like, oh and like, men are lasting for an hour plus, like, is that the expectation they have? And then are they sort of like really taken back when they find out that's not reality?
I would say so. Like, yes, like, oh, I'm freezing, it's distracting me a little bit, sorry. It's more like, that they're like, I've done it and it's not like that, and am I supposed to be doing stuff like that? And like really wanting somebody to, again, like translate porn to them, like doggy style, a couple pumps, flip this way, and like everybody's always game, you know what I mean? And no, it doesn't really work like that in real life. So I'd say as far as like talking about porn with kids, because it comes up so much. Like I teach right now with a charity in Toronto about menstruation. Like, that's it, because the curriculum is very lacking in Ontario, and we talk about periods and how they work. You know how many times just segues into sex, porn, this, that. You're like, holy crap, we were just talking about tampons like 2 minutes ago. I tend to really focus on what you're not going to see in porn, because that's what's really confusing them. So I'll say, there's a big difference between reality and porn, and what you're talking about. Like, it wasn't that way for me, and I don't want to act that way, or she didn't act that way, and what does that mean? It like this is what I'm used to seeing. And I say in porn, you're not going to see people talking to each other. Like, this is my TikTok, people talking, people laughing, people asking for consent, people getting turned down graciously, people farting in each other's faces, people queefing, for Christ's sake, men losing erections, women needing, you're not going to see that stuff. And that's what makes it real. That's the real stuff. So when you're saying like, it's awkward and, oh, I don't want to do some of that stuff, or she don't want to do it, and what does that mean? You're talking about real life now. Like, this is real life, and it's like wanting somebody to fill in those gaps. So the questions that you have are normal, like, you know, the feelings that you're feeling are normal, because you're seeing sex basically a highlight reel. And grown-ups, you know, people in real life, you're seeing it now. Don't really act like that. And the stuff that you're talking about where it's awkward, or, you know, we're giggling or whatever, that's the stuff. Like, that's the real stuff. So like, oh my God, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, there is definitely, like, as far as porn and reality is concerned, I feel like porn literacy is greatly needed, because there's only two ways to figure out that porn isn't real. You know, there's only two ways to figure out that porn is performative, and it's, you know, you're acting for a camera, and as soon as you put a camera in a room, people are just going to behave differently. There's only two ways to figure that out. And one is sex ed, comprehensive sexual health education with a porn literacy unit, which we don't have, and one is life experience, and that's it. So, and they don't have that. So I feel like adults really have this very great responsibility, because kids are so desperate. Like, they're just so desperate to talk to somebody. And like I said, with like the previous comment, 90th percentile kids want it. Like, kids are desperate for mentorship. Like, they want somebody to talk to them. And we're both in it. Like, you can only get this from sex education. You can only get it from life experience. And people that, you know, like porn or don't find it problematic, or like are neither here nor there about it, people that really hate porn, are in agreement on the same thing. Like, we don't want porn to be sex ed. We don't want our kids to look at porn and think that that's real. And porn stars are not teachers, they are entertainers. So now, I don't know, back to like, why do we not have comprehensive sex ed in schools? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. But anyways, in answer to your question, yes, I find that there's a big disconnect for kids between reality and fantasy. And like, they really often want somebody to like interpret, like, is this normal? Like, when I have sex, you know, I'm not flipping around and doing all this stuff, or like, do I have to do that? Like, no. You know, does everyone do that? No. Like, is it awkward for everyone? Yeah. And the only way to get more comfortable is to just treat each other like human beings, talk to each other, you know? And that's another thing too, that talking during sex, they're like, do grown-ups talk? I'm like, yeah, yes, it's a great time to start talking. You can, and like, you know, talk about anything. Talk about how it feels. Talk about what you like. Talk about what you don't like. You know, and what am I saying? You know, adults have a hard time with that too.
Yeah, that was going to be my next point, because
yeah, we're not good at it.
We were lacking this education for kids, and they're desperate for it, and they're going to all these places to try to find the answers.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of the times it's up to the parents who are supposed to have these conversations, and one, they're lacking in education.
Yeah.
Which I find so fascinating, because, you know, we had, you know, sexual liberation in the 60s with, which would have been my grandparents. You know, we had, what is it, the Feminine Mystique, I think was the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
All sorts of different things. And then we had, you know, the rise of the LGBTQ. Like, they grew up so much around this more talking about and freedom of sexual expression and liberation. Yet we still, you know, they're woefully unprepared to talk to their kids. Maybe it's awkward. Maybe they don't have the answers. Yeah. There's the trope that when you're married, you no longer have sex. Right. But like, you know, I know tons of adults that are much older that the joke, you know, it's the joke. Like, once you get married, the woman stops putting out. Like, I can't remember. Right. But like, so many people say that. And it's, you know, it's like, what's going on in their bedroom? Do they talk about it? And to your point, just right now, I don't think they do. Like, I don't think there's obviously people who do, but I think a lot of like the common generalization of adults and our parents, like, I don't think they don't talk about their mental health or anything. So why would they talk about sex?
Yeah, no, they don't. And like, I feel like, so we're actually, like, I learned this in school. We've had two sexual revolutions so far, like flapper era, and then what you were talking about, like the feminine mystique, it would have been like second wave feminism era, when the birth control pill came out. And they were about 40 years apart. So we're overdue. Like we should be having one, or we're in it, or something is happening, right? And I feel like Gen Z, like I teach young kids, they are very articulate. They have, like, you're right, like seeing these massive leaps forward with the LGBTQ community, having the language to understand, like, to understand their identity, being very empathetic and open. Like, they're great. But it's such a, like, running right in tandem with it is this like really archaic curriculum in the school. Like I don't understand it. Like it's very rare that academic, like educational institutions are lining up with what's happening in the world. It's bizarre. You know what I mean? And somehow they're getting these messages. You're right. Like been these massive leaps forward. And I suppose that's us and Gen X really pushing things to, like, legalize gay marriage in the States, or legalize gay marriage here, and see these great sweeping changes. But I don't know, we're really missing it in schools. Like we're really missing the mark. And it's just largely political. Like I think it's so taboo for some people that you can really scare them very quickly.
Yeah, I think it's very rooted in sort of religion, and not to say that your religion is wrong if like sex is something you're positive about, but I mean, you have sort of like the Christian fundamentalism that really controls it in the United States, and I think that does leak up here. I think the internet and social media in general has just made kids grow up, and I don't say this in a bad sense, but like they just have so much knowledge and information. Like adults and people in positions of authority and power are just so woefully unprepared for this dramatic shift. Like it's like they're caught flat-footed. They don't know what to do, and instead of reacting in a positive way and being like, okay, like let's try to, it's like they're sort of like try to like, no, like let's dampen it out, like no, let's put the fire out. Because I think, to your point, I think we are in the midst of a sexual revolution, but not in the sense of like, in a way we are with like more sexual liberation and things like that, but in gender and sexuality and exploring new things like kink and polyamory, all these different things that people would, if it was illegal for the most part, for the most of time, we're now able to talk about. And so, but I don't know, like it just, our establishments and our systems just aren't ready to do that yet. And I mean, your answer's mine.
I think like this is maybe part of a larger conversation, like the third wave of the revolution, or the third revolution, I think will be probably a swing towards intimacy, like people really wanting intimacy and swinging away from casual sex. And I think we're seeing that in some ways, hookup culture. What am I trying to say here? Like in an age of the internet, when everyone is so connected, there's a lot of disconnection. Like people are feeling lonelier than ever and stuff. And I do not think that a global health pandemic helped any of that. So everyone's shut away from each other, and we're like so frustrated with online interactions, that I think there's going to be a swing towards wanting something a little bit more intimate and substantial, while incorporating LGBTQ this and gender fluidity that, and like all of these new rich language and lifestyles and polyamory. Like we're living in this very strange paradox where, like, we're talking about sex in ways like consensual non-monogamy, Will Smith and Jada Pinkett. Like, oh, okay, like that's, everyone's talking about that, and then don't say gay and women can't get abortions in this. Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I really feel like socially, people want something, but like politically, like, well, like they are just, no, they don't want it. And that's what basically revolutions are built on. The people want one thing, and though the powers that be don't, and then you just push until it bursts. So I feel like the States is on the brink of something. I don't know how much I want to get into that, but it is built on the foundation of sexual tension, frustration. Like that's going to blow up. Like, I don't know. Anyways. I feel like if you want to predict what the world is going to look like in a bit, just watch how people have sex and watch how people talk about it. I feel like it'll lead you to what the next wave is going to look like. I have all kinds of thoughts on that.
Could do a separate whole podcast on that.
That's a whole other thing. Oh my God.
But it's an interesting point, and like the confusing two realities in a way that we're living in. Do you think it has to do with sort of, I mean, we sort of had like the Me Too movement come forward and really emphasize consent. And now we're even talking about things that are better than consent, enthusiastic consent.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
Tonight, sure, whatever. Like, yeah, hell yeah, I want to do it. Right. Like, we're having those conversations, but we're still under this, misogynistic patriarchal society where men are, it's like, it's very transactional. And I mean, you're on TikTok, you see it all the time with how people like Andrew Tate and all these other people talk about women and how women, and on my side of men, like watching how women talk about men, it's like we still have this weird gender dynamic where it's like we're acting one way or performing one way for the internet or society in a way, but like in the bedroom, at least from my experience, like none of the dynamics that were sort of like taught or like brought up in really like play out. And the biggest example of that is like men, it's like, right, men want sex all the time and women are like, I think you said it in a TikTok, it's like the chase and like the
pursuer avoider. Yeah.
And that's sort of what it is. But in my experience, like once a woman wants to be with you, like their sex drive is way beyond anything I could ever like make. And like, that's been my experience through my adult life. I can't speak for everyone, but do you think it has to do with like these weird gender roles that we've been assigned to play and like it just doesn't match up with what we actually want?
I mean, I think that men and women are different. Like, I think that we are, and I say that often, but I think we are like organically or whatever. I really don't like the word wired. Like, I just don't like we're wired or. But how we're socialized really, really matters. All of those things really matter. Like all of the messages that you get about sex. So the am I normal? Like, at least for me, I was like, I don't hate sex. Like, that was really what I was basically indoctrinated into believing, was that women just don't like it and men need it all the time. Like, and that wasn't how I felt. And I had boyfriends that weren't, I need it all the time. Like, no. And in real life, I would have been like, fuck off. Like, so like, enthusiastic consent you're talking about. Like, these are things that we learned. So I guess I should back up a second. I taught sex ed for like 10 years on and off. And then in COVID, I finally pursued a graduate level education in sexual health into my adult life. So I thought I knew everything, was, the best, and then really kind of just surrounded myself with all of it and was like, I have a lot to learn. And I finally had some sex changes a lot, like the way that we talk about it and the way that we're socialized. But anyways, enthusiastic consent, how you were saying, like, it's not just consent, it's enthusiastic. Again, I think conceptually, I understood that from a very young age, that like, it's not supposed to be this like, okay, honey, get it over with. Like, what is that crap? Like, because I'm not like that. Like, if I want to do it, I just do. Like, I want to do it. And then I, feeling so conflicted about what if you told a guy I really want to have sex with you, or what if you really like pursued a guy? Would he like think that you're like, cheap or easy, or like guys aren't into being pursued? Like, bullshit. Like, that's like it's wrong. You know what I mean? So, and I'm not gonna say like men love to be pursued and this is what they're like. I'm saying people are human beings, okay? And like, it really depends on you and your dynamic and your relationship. But if you're telling 50% of the population, if you pursue sex, you're dirty and disgusting and you don't respect yourself, then you're telling the other 50% that you can disrespect those people when they show interest in you. It's fucking ridiculous, yeah. So I don't remember what your question was, but yeah, like the roles I think that we're taught, the way that we're socialized to view gender, each other, power, sex, like all of that matters. And the am I normal crowd as adults, I think, are spending so much time trying to unlearn that, you know, that they're like, is it normal that I'm not like, you know, I'm chasing my husband? Is it normal that like I'm not so, you know, I'm tired after work and I'm not so into having sex with my wife? Like, Jesus Christ, people. Yeah. Like, you're not abnormal. You've just been indoctrinated into thinking it has to look a certain way, and then when it doesn't fit properly, you feel like shit, you know?
Yeah, and
God.
it's a hard thing to get through, even when you're aware, even when
Yeah.
you sort of know these things and you are communicating. It's still hard to get the brain to catch up to like sort of
Yeah.
what, you know, the
Yeah.
anxiety, the all the things around it. You know, like if a man can't come, the woman might
Yeah.
sort of take that personally because a man is always supposed to come in 30 seconds, and that's, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's so much, or a man saying no. What do you mean I'm
Yeah.
saying no? Do you not want, like, that's
Yeah.
just coming from the male perspective. But
Hmm.
you know, there's so much of it. And even if you're aware and a little more woke, I guess, quotation marks, it's still hard to get the mind to catch up to
Mhm.
this.
Yeah, for sure. God, there was something you said that really, or men think about sex every 7 seconds. Like, come on. Like, maybe some do, but if you keep telling them that, like, you think about it constantly, it's constantly on your mind, and you're also inundated with it. Like, the world is basically set up for you. And I think we're seeing, you know, different narratives and different gazes and stuff now. But, like, if you're blasted with sexual imagery that's for you, catered to you, tailored for you, then maybe yeah, like you're thinking about sex a lot, but like those two things are connected, you know? And then if you're constantly saying crap like that, I think the thing was men think about sex every 30 seconds. I think I heard that. Like, don't you think you're giving them some ideas like you know, people that men aren't thinking about sex every 30 seconds, or like, am I weird? Or like, you're like, should I be thinking about sex everything? You convince, if you just keep telling people they're one way, I think some people just really believe it, and then, you know, comes back later in their life and they're like, oh crap, I think I have to unlearn all of this stuff, like there's really nothing wrong with me.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I think, yeah, and especially now that we have labels and sort of like different identities associated with different things, I think, you know, depending on what it is, I'll use the example because I did see a TikTok. I wish I could remember the creator, but it was a guy talking about how he doesn't have a high sex drive. And then it got him to thinking, well, am I asexual? And
Right.
it's like, you know, it's interesting how, you know, now we sort of names to it, but just like how, again, we're conditioned and how we're supposed to think starts to play into like our actual feelings towards everything. And it's just it's a confuses already. I mean, like, especially like when you're first having sex with someone, it's already confusing.
Yeah.
And then you're trying to learn everything and about this person, well, at least you're supposed to be, but
Yeah.
then you're like throwing in all these other things that, like, it just makes it so much more complicated. And like, it's already complicated enough sometimes.
I know, right? Just trying to relax and have a good time. And I'm thinking about all this stuff that I think that I'm supposed to do, how I'm supposed to act, and then you get stuck in your own head and you're like, well, womp womp. Like,
Yeah.
that wasn't fun. Yeah.
We talked about like a couple, I rhymed off a few, but like, what are some other, I don't know, myths or things that you commonly hear that like you're just like, this isn't true, this is bullshit, like you want people to know that like this is, I don't know, like it's just set the record straight, here's the microphone, set the record straight on a couple things.
Like, I don't know if it's so revolutionary. Like, I've had a lot of Oprah style aha moments during the program where I was like, I don't think I ever saw things that way. And again, like studying during COVID, so I'm not in a classroom, not in a tutorial, so I'm just like spinning in my house, like, what the fuck? Like, somebody talk to me about this, which is basically the genesis of TikTok, where I was like, fuck, I'm just gonna like put this stuff out there. Like, myths about male sexuality, it's so funny because female sexuality and the mystification of all of it, and the, you know, the mystification of the clitoris, where is it, and women are these complex whatevers and men are these simple, like, I think are these narratives that we're all like married to for so long. And I was so drawn to like demystifying female sexuality, and then the more I was like talking and learning about women, the more I was like, it's making me really interested in men. It's like showing me a lot more about men and how they think and feel. And then when I would tell people in my program, I think I want to focus more on cisgendered heterosexual male sexuality. Like, I think when I become a sex therapist, I'd like to be focusing on that. And if I were to pursue this at a higher level, like PhD level, I would want my research to be in and around there. And I cannot tell you how many people in my program, God bless them, practicing in the field are like, why would you want to study heterosexual male sexuality? It's so simple. There's nothing to it. It's just like, why are we so conditioned to that? So there's one like, I guess the myth busting is that you guys are like these simple whatevers. It bothers me. And that you're not emotional, all of those things, like simple, logical, physical, we can compartmentalize our feelings. Like, I can't. And I don't have all the answers, but there was this Oprah-esque aha moment that I had. And I did a TikTok about it. I'm pretty sure you commented on it. Was this study that it took a bunch of heterosexual men, and it was just basically like, what do you want from sex? What does it mean to you? How does it make you feel? And the title of the study is called "I Want You to Want Me." And these men spent so much time talking about what it felt like to be wanted. Like, they were just like, sex, this is like, she's into it, and she's moaning, and she's groaning, and like, she's all, and then I'm like reading it, like, there is virtually no mention of themselves. They're not like, I'm moaning and groaning, and I'm losing it. It's all she is. That's it. So like this Oprah aha, where I'm like, okay, so then can I, is there a compelling argument to be made here that male sexuality is actually pretty selfless? And that it's generous? Like, what does it look like in real life if like she's moaning and groaning and into it, like all over you? Are you doing stuff for her? Like, is she like, can we try this? And you're like, yeah, like, let's do that. Because in my personal life, again, if you ask a guy to do something, like, it's not like you can't have boundaries, but very rarely do you guys say no? Like, you just seem so willing to be like, sure. And like, you want to know, like, you like that? Okay, let's try it. So like, there's like, parts of my life where I'm like, the way that male sexuality is sold, being really selfish and self-involved and like selfish to the point of almost like threatening and a little violent even, you know what I mean? And sexual violence exists, but in my personal experience, I guess some of the guys I was with were like pretty giving. So like, that wasn't really my experience, not all the time. And then this study, I'm reading it and going, okay, so it's not just me then, because I can hear what they're saying. And when I made that TikTok and was like, I think that we got it wrong. I think that, male sexuality is probably very generous and giving and a little bit selfless. And it seemed to really resonate with a lot of men who were commenting like, that's me. And I think that's a big myth. You know what I mean? That it's just about you, and it's about dominating and conquering and all this crap. Like, if you just keep telling guys that, they're gonna just believe it.
Well, I just to jump in there quick.
Yeah. I'll keep talking. You have to stop me.
I feel like that again, and going back to that conversation of learning about sex from porn, it's like that's how we're sort of like taught that to be. And then once you, and especially like younger men, like in their early 20s, when you're first sort of like having sex and exploring, like you're probably like that a little more selfish. But once you actually like, maybe have long-term partners, or you really start to, want to please women, because I think at the end of the day, while it shouldn't be the ultimate goal, but like having a woman orgasm is like the ultimate sort of like pride, belt. You're just like, yes, I did. And I think that's what it's centered on in a way, because if we want to, we can climax pretty quickly, and like that's just anatomy. Not all the time, but most of the time.
Not all the time, but I see
like you want to please your woman, like that's like what you want to do. And so I think as men start to get older and explore, I think that's definitely, that's the way I feel about things, is that like I want it to make it very much centered on my partner, because like I'm just happy to be here, I'm just along for the ride. Like I'm the inner child in me's like, yeah, right, like let's go. So I want to make sure my partner's happy. And it's about you too, but like I really do feel like
we're talking about cisgendered heterosexual men. I just feel like you really like to see horny, happy women. Like, I think it just makes you very happy. I think even if you're not responsible for the pleasure, you like to see it. I think that's a big deal. Like, I think it's a very big deal that, like, if it was all about spreading your seed and all that crap, like, what would you care how much somebody wants you? So, like, anyways, that study had a really big impact on me. And I was like, what if we just started saying stuff like, no, male sexuality is very relational. There's a lot of concern over how the two parts are connecting, which is why they spend a lot of time describing her audio, physical, tactile cues that tell him that she wants, like, you're spending so much time talking about what it feels like and looks like to be wanted that it sounds like this isn't just about you. Like, there's a lot of concern over how this person demonstrates arousal, whereas, like, I don't want to say that women don't, I hate, like, women like this and men like this, but women don't usually use that same kind of language. That's not really what was, like, coming up in a lot of the studies that I was seeing and reading about female pleasure and desire and stuff. Anyways, that's a whole other thing.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
And that's why what frustrates me about the internet in particular is everyone wants sort of like black and white, and they don't allow room for like nuance, and like people are humans, and yes, you're gonna have some men who are absolutely like that, but you're also gonna have, like, like all 3.5 billion men, there's gonna be a lot of fluctuation in the way people achieve. But I think one of the biggest things is like, and this is another thing I saw on TikTok, like, give a man a compliment and watch him light up. Like, men just don't receive a lot of recognition in terms of, like, we do maybe like when we chase success, or like, we sort of like have a high status, but like when it just comes to like friends or partners, or just like really like intimate day-to-day stuff, family, like a lot of the time, like, we're not used to sort of like people reminding us that they want to be around us and be with us. Like, that's just not what men do. So like, I think that's also part of it, and that's on the patriarchy.
Yeah. I don't think you're encouraged to be emotional or be vulnerable or be generous with your feelings and things like that, and you're not really praised or rewarded for having great relationships or being thoughtful and sensitive. You know what I mean? So like, what kinds of behaviors get rewarded? Like, I don't know, aggression, like stuff like that, like anger. I don't know. Like, what was I going to say? I feel like, you said something and I really, like, it lit my brain up, and now it's like, can't remember, but something with, like, you don't have an emotional outlet. And I think that's, and you don't have these, like these feelings, emotions, like, being emotional has been conflated with being feminine. It's bullshit. It's emotions are human. Okay. Humans need them. Okay. Everybody needs to be emotional, express emotion. And I think that, if you don't have any outlets for that, like if you don't have other relationships where you can be emotional and vulnerable and generous and giving and stuff like that, then sex becomes the only place where you could do that. And I think this is probably a big reason why you guys want it so much. Like, or it's at least part of it. Like, do you have a place where you are allowed to just be totally vulnerable? And like, I don't know, like, these are questions that I think men really need to ask themselves. I've done other TikToks about that too, and could do 100 more, but intimacy and sex are not the same thing. They're two different things. I think that women might have a better grasp on that, because we're not policed in the same way that you are about being emotional and stuff like that. We're policed. Our emotions are policed. If we're too emotional, we're hysterical and nuts. But like, you guys can't show anything. It's just ridiculous. Okay. And like, the demon, like, it's emasculating to show the slightest bit of empathy for another person. Anyways, I forgot what I was going to say, but intimacy and sex are not the same thing. And I think that men are really struggling because of that. You can be intimate with a woman and it's not sexual. You can be intimate with another man, you can be intimate with just about anybody. Like, it's about being vulnerable. It's just about having a good connection with somebody, and not everything. It doesn't have to be sexual. Not everything has to be sexual. I think that's the foundational problem really with everything is that sex generally tends to be the only place where you guys can go, where you're allowed to be anything other than, you know, like dominating and bullshitty, and then you're just chasing it around all day. I mean, it makes some sense to me, but
It's a great question.
I digress.
It's a really great question, and something I'm definitely going to think about. Did you see? It was making the rounds on TikTok. I literally just did a video like 30 minutes before we came on here, about like that psychology today article, the rise of single lonely men.
Yeah,
and I think that's you know, it's part of it. It comes into the dynamic of relationships and everything, but also in sex, that we almost don't have the skill set in order to have like a fulfilling sex life in a lot of ways. Just parsing out the whole sort of relationship side and communication side, but like communication, like you said, intimacy, all that also comes into sex, and we also can't really form that in a lot of ways. Like even on myself, like I have trouble asking for like what I want because I don't know. I've never based it upon like my own needs. And so like I don't know.
Or you just mean generally?
Just generally.
Yeah.
But like in sex as well. Like I'm just, again, happy to be here. So I've never asked myself, what do I actually like? What don't I like?
Yeah.
And I think like the communication and the intimacy and all that stuff, and like men also struggle in the aspect of sex around that too.
Yes. Is that a question? Yeah. I would agree with you. I mean, the rise of single lonely men, I have like so many thoughts, and then I want to make a video, but I'm like, they are coming for me on TikTok. I got in big trouble. I don't know if you know, because I talked about porn and self-care. And I don't know if you're gonna, maybe if you do a clip, don't put this one, because they'll come for me again, these no fappers, who I don't even know who these people are, but they were like, I said that pornography and masturbation was self-care and it's okay, and these no fap bros were like, you're trying to destroy masculinity. What the hell? I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I couldn't even make the connection. I had to like go on the internet. People on my Instagram were like sending me articles. They're like, girl, they're gonna get mad. I was like, who are these guys? Anyways, the rise of single lonely men, I want to comment on. I'm just scared. These guys are gonna come for me.
So men were coming at you like by saying like masturbating is like emasculate, like it.
Yeah. Like, okay, so I don't know enough about no fap to be this like. Okay, so but do you know what fapping is? It's just jerking off. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So there's a whole no fap movement where men just stop masturbating entirely, but they stop watching porn. So they really blame porn for locking them away from themselves. But I don't know, and they're just like jerking off all day, and they can't have relationships. So like they don't masturbate, and they stop watching porn entirely because it's just destroying them. So like porn is extremely polarizing. Like I get it, it elicits a lot of strong emotions in people. Sorry, let me close that. But all I said was that, and we learned this in my class, was like, and I didn't really need it to be, like, if you are watching porn and masturbating, that's its function. It's serving its function. So porn with a purpose is important. Like if you're like, I'm watching it, I'm getting aroused, I'm jerking off, I'm going to sleep. Like, okay, that's the purpose that it's serves. So if that's not happening, if you're watching porn and not masturbating, we were taught that this is a very big red flag. And that makes sense to me. Like, and I don't really, I'm not done the class yet, but at first I was like, huh? And I kind of like marinated with it for a bit. And it's kind of like, why? It's supposed to serve a function, and the function is self-care. And most human beings, when they're looking at porn that they like, that's of their taste, they will get aroused. It's like as close to 100% as you can get. Like we like to see that. So that's what I was just saying. It's a normal part of your sexuality to be aroused by that. It's your self-care, doing it in tandem together. It's concerning if you're not masturbating and looking at like. Anyway, so these no fap guys got really mad at me, and they were like, they're basically like purposely not masturbating and staying away from porn because they basically blame porn stars for like ruining their, I don't know, strength. Like they're weak because of these like it's so stupid. Just I don't know, you're a guy, you figure it out, okay? Like I can't do the mental gymnastics where I was like, You're mad at me?
I think it's like another tier of like the incel community.
It is. It is in social
Yeah,
media.
you're
Yeah.
blaming women for your, who know? There could be many reasons. It could be mental illness, addiction.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if porn addiction. I think it's a thing, but
This is what pissed them off. Okay, I'm just gonna say.
okay, go ahead.
I learned in my class that porn addiction does not exist, is what they said. Okay. And I should have prefaced that by saying that porn addiction is extremely controversial in the sex therapy community, in the mental health community, and in the addictions okay, people are fighting it out today. Like, it's not explored very much. And a lot of the research that we looked at was like March 2022. Like, it's now that we're trying to figure out if this is really a thing. They're looking at dopamine this and neural pathways that, or whatever, right? But porn addiction does not exist, with something that I said that I learned in class, and that it really comes down to a moral incongruence. So it's like you hate yourself for looking at it, but you just keep doing it. And then we're trained to be like, okay, what is it about it that's upsetting you? Why do you think you can't look at it? And there's a very high correlation. I'm sorry, I'm getting really academic and blah, blah.
Love it. Love
it. Okay. And I'm still learning, so I'm not a professional. There's a really high correlation between religiosity and this moral incongruence. And it's just so great that the sex therapy community is like, there's just a very big relationship between like being taught that porn and masturbation is very shameful and people self-reporting as porn addicts. Like, it's such a big correlation that there's a lot of hesitation to say you're addicted. They just are mostly saying you have a moral dilemma. Like, this is what's great. That said, lots of people disagree. The sex therapy community has landed on sexual compulsion. And again, I'm not really a pro in this, and I'm still learning about it, but a compulsion is different than an addiction. I'm not sure exactly how, but it's just different. And I would say that I'm not super happy with this this area, because I feel like I didn't realize it was so unresearched. Like, I find the definition not so great. Anyways, I don't even know how we landed here, but
we're in the middle of science. I love it.
Yeah. Porn addiction. You were saying something about
we blame women for this, and maybe it is because we can't hold relationships, or it doesn't even have to be related. Like, your girl left you and you internalize that you watch porn. I know there's like this comedian bit where they joke about like you're watching porn and then it escalates to like the most dirtiest thing as you become aroused. Then when you finish, you're like, why did I watch that?
That's a real thing. Yeah.
And it's like, what is happening? But it's just like, I think it comes down to just men not being healthy with themselves and looking for a scapegoat, and like everything else, they want to blame women for some of their shortcomings.
100%. And in this video, I don't know if you saw it on TikTok, where I talked about healthy porn consumption, which got them so mad. I said one of the ways to have a healthy relationship with porn is that you recognize that people that get involved in porn aren't doing so, or lots are not getting involved in porn because they're screwed up or fucked up. Like, you don't have to be a shameful, dirty person to be able to do that. Some people just like it, okay? They don't have a problem with it. And the reason that that's so important for people to understand, particularly men, is that you're not projecting on them. Like, you're dirty and you've made me dirty and like, I hate myself. Like, no, you're like, I can respect that you do this. That's your job, okay? And you're still a human being. And like, the concern would be that you're like thinking that these people are really dirty and disgusting, and that you kind of use them and discard them, like you're using them for arousal, and you just kind of like, okay, this one's a slut, she's gross. And then like, are you going to do that in real life to people? Are you going to do that in real life to sexual women, like women that want you? Like, are you going to think that sexual desire or sex is just shameful and dirty? Like, that's the scary bit. Like, that's what people need, again, particularly men, need to understand, because as far as porn addiction is concerned, it's like very rarely women and very rarely LGBTQ people that are saying they have a porn addiction problem. It's basically exclusively heterosexual white men.
Yeah.
The trifecta, you know.
Yeah. Happy to fall in with those compadre. God damn. Honestly, and I am one, and I don't understand it, but it's so interesting that like
Yeah.
these men, these incels or the fap or whoever, um, are like so against this and against women and against sex work. Yet,
Yeah.
men, I would probably guess is like 99%, 0.9% of who is like the funder. Like we are the
Yeah.
supporters of these creators on OnlyFans and Pornhub,
Yeah.
all these different, like we're the ones, like we're the consumer, we're the supporting the economy, yet we're sitting there like bashing and
Yeah.
putting down and dehumanizing all these different things. Yet we're like, it's just I think it comes from an internalized guilt. It comes from
Yeah.
an internalized misogyny and all these different things. And it's just men not being able to, I don't know, deal with things in a healthy way.
For sure. Like the messages you get about sex are important. The messages you get about gender are important. So like if women are, you know, not allowed to pursue sex, women don't even like sex and men need it. Like you're getting indoctrinated into thinking women aren't sexual. We are. And then like, you know, for further steps in that same direction is now we're talking about sex work where women could be having, you know, engaging in sex work, not because they're fucked up, because they just like to perform on OnlyFans. Jesus, you know? And I think a lot of it has to do with consent. Like I don't know how to articulate it properly, but like I saw this one stupid TikTok where this guy was like, women are okay with being objectified as long as you like start paying on OnlyFans or something. And I was like, what are you not understanding here? Like she has control and consent and she's making money. Like what's the problem? Like I don't know, like I don't know how to articulate this completely. It's like it seems to me that the issue you have is that she's got power in that role. You really don't like that. Okay, you want to objectify her when she has none and is scared and vulnerable. But if she's got control and power and money, you really don't like it. Like why do you keep funding it, you dumb? I don't get it. Like oh my god, just ripping apart adult stars. Like a lot of like the guys in the comments were like they're hoes and they're this and they're blah, blah, blah. They're talking about them in a way like I feel like you've been looking at their shit for a while, okay? Like, you know, you're the one who's funding this endeavor. Like, why? Like, anyways, I don't know if I'm articulating properly. I think that's the moral incongruence that keeps coming up in sex therapy. That they're like, I have a hard time saying it's porn addiction because these guys just straight up hate women and themselves for wanting them. It's like fucking weird, you know?
I'm glad you said that because
Yeah.
like that's a profound point. Like that might, I don't want to put that maybe the social media clip because that's going to bring the attention.
Oh, no.
But it's true and it is about power and consent because you know there are tons of relationships and women. I don't know if tons is the right word, but like women do enjoy sort of like a dynamic with their partner, kink and non-kink, where it's like there's a dominant and they like that, but it's consent. They're consenting to be objectified because they like it and they're safe.
Yeah.
And they love this person, or they're into this person. And like that's the key, that it's not about objectification, it's about consent. And
it's just sorry, I'm gonna
no, but you're right. It's about like the power, and that like the women has the power in that situation bugs the shit out of these guys.
Yeah.
And you're right that they hate themselves for liking it. And
yeah.
It's like, you just nailed it for me. Like that was my Oprah moment.
Okay. But the domination stuff, I remember doing a video on BDSM and it's some guy, I ended up deleting his comment or whatever. God, was on Instagram, I don't remember. It was like, oh, these girls crying about getting beaten up or whatever, fucking Me Too, and then you're like wanting to get like whipped. Like this is where conceptually I think I understood things from a young age, but just didn't have the language. And then it's consent, buddy. Like there is a very big difference between sexual domination and sexual assault. What the fuck are you not understanding? Like why is that so hard? Somebody wanting to be sexually dominated is okay. If you want, the difference between that and abuse is okay, I'm gonna swear, it's motherfucking consent. That you can go that long in life and not understand the difference between the two. You know, like do you want to please somebody or do you want to hurt somebody? I don't get it. But anyways, but
curious, and I don't know if you know the answer, but this is something I've talked about before. And if you don't know the answer, that's okay. But there, there is this sort of like women who were maybe abused or sexually assaulted, raped, who do sort of find themselves maybe enjoying um
Mm.
dynamics of canker with their partner. And part of that, of what I've heard from people, is about like it's about getting power back. Like they sort of
Yeah,
get power back. Like I don't, is there science to that? Is there anything in sort of your
I don't
scope of
know. Like,
practice?
I'm not super comfortable talking about that. Like,
Okay.
I have some things that I have learned that I think can kind of lend themselves to that. I just don't want to be, I'm learning. And
Yeah.
um, like rape is not about sex, it's about power, you know,
Yeah.
and it's about taking power. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. So when you say things like, "Oh, why were you wearing that?" or "dressed like that," or "walking it," like you're making it sound like it's a sex. No, like this is about robbing that person of their control and power. And then you're not aroused by consent. You're aroused by the lack of it. You're aroused by fear and intimidate. Like that's what you want. So I can see like the intention for those people, predators, is to intimidate somebody, and you know they're aroused by, again, the lack of consent, and they're aroused by taking that power from somebody. So I can see why somebody who's been abused is seeking out these scenarios where they can get it back, almost reenacted in a way. And like it's something that I learned, like again, this is something that I learned very quickly, is PTSD, like post traumatic, whatever. After a sexual assault, I think people expect everybody to act a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that simple, okay? And I don't want to say anything. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I'll just say whatever. People expect people to act a certain way. Things are rarely like that, okay? People are complicated. And if you can picture three lanes, okay, if we're talking about a woman, particularly a heterosexual woman sexually assaulted by a man, picture those three lanes. There's hyposexuality, there's neutral, and then there's hypersexuality. So we police women's sexual morality. Like, don't wear that, don't drink that, don't go there, don't say it, blah, blah, blah. Like, so you're like led to believe and taught to believe that you've elicited this terrible thing, right? Hyposexuality is like no desire for sex. Like you don't want to engage, you don't want to be seen as a sexual being whatsoever in this context. So I think that when people think about sexual assault and trauma, I think that as a society we've been conditioned to thinking that women will fall into hypo automatically, that you're never going to want to engage with a man again, and that we shame women regardless. So never mind somebody who's been abused, like, but it goes double for an abuse victim. That's the language that people use a lot. Like, you of all people should know, like, you shouldn't be out there drinking, like, not right. So the person that did that to you gets to control your sexuality for the rest of your life. That's power. That's it, you know? So I can see why somebody would swing hyper and act out in a way where they're constantly trying to get that power back. So that doesn't necessarily mean BDSM, but that just means putting yourself in situations. It's definitely not BDSM, because BDSM is, and that's a different thing. But I can see somebody swinging hyper in an attempt to get some of that power back. The person that did that to me doesn't get to dictate how I act. I'm in control of this, and I'm gonna be so sexual. Like you would be shocked to learn, like, oh my god, she was abused. Like she just seems so like sexy and powerful, because sex is power, and rape is a power grab. That's what it is, right? And then neutral sexuality is somebody that's kind of reconciled these feelings and is getting held, whatever that looks like, and that's a little bit different. But hypo and hyper, and people, all of that to say that I feel like if we just had a simple class of some kind where we, again, comprehensive sexual health education, where you could sit people down and say things are not so, like, people do not all behave the same way, okay? Like there's hypo, there's hyper, there's this, there's that, there's masculinity, morality, all of these things matter. That if people could just grasp that, we would understand how to spot it better in our friends, in our, you know, relationships, in our whatever, that you be able to see the signs of somebody's behavior being very different, and you're like, okay, maybe something happened and I can be helpful and they can talk to me. But anyways, all that to say, as far as like, I can see why somebody would want to act things out to get power back. And if it's controlled and there's consent, I think that healing and getting better looks the way that you want it to look, as long as you have power. Like, as long as you're not being hurt, as long as you have control and there is consent, people are rarely very simple. Does that answer your question? Like, I know that was a lot of information.
I think you answered that in a way better than I could have hoped, because I know you were a little hesitant off the start and you were trying to tiptoe a little bit, like not get in trouble or hurt anyone's feelings, but you articulated that in a way where now I understand. Like, I knew the answer was nuanced and complicated.
Yeah.
It's not a straightforward answer, but I think for a lot of people, those three lanes, those three avenues, and like, I'm sure it can fluctuate between, like, maybe you're hypersexual one week and hyper the next. And trauma, as a mental health advocate, trauma and PTSD are incredibly complex and unpredictable. You never know how you're going to feel and how you're going to react. And I think that goes for the same. So thank you for giving the best possible answer you could have given.
Oh, you're welcome. And if you're curious, because again, we treat men and women differently, picture those three lanes. And now it's hypo masculinity and hyper masculinity. So if a man is sexually assaulted, what generally tends to happen if you have these lanes is he's either hypo, does not want to engage. What does masculinity look like? He's not confrontational, does not want to be a threat, does not want to engage with men whatsoever. Hypo masculine, and there's hyper masculine. What does that look like? Overcompensating, picking fights, super angry, like. Then there's neutral, and hopefully that man is getting help. But we police women's sexuality, we police our morality, and we police your masculinity. And then it manifests in these ways that it's not easy for us if we keep getting locked into these stupid roles that don't fit, and we keep getting told we have to be a certain way, and we keep policing everybody.
Yeah,
it's screwing everybody up,
Yeah, it's really frustrating. And you see it everywhere. Like, we're talking about sex, but you see this in every facet of our being and online discourse and dialogue, and we just sit here going around in circles arguing about these things. It's like, just break free. I just want to break free. So I'm glad there's people like you and others who are just sort of like trying to break that mold, and just give people like facts and information. I was going to ask you a question about like sex 101, but I'm going to pivot. So the last thing I sort of want to end this on, because I think what I've gathered from this conversation is sort of like a lack of, we just don't talk to one another in a lot of ways about everything, but especially as hetero people, like men and women, we don't talk about sex. So like, for most of the people who listen to my podcast are primarily women, and they're primarily between the ages of 18 and 34, sort of going into 45 as well. I want people to know, how can we have a healthy conversation about sex? And maybe we're scared to initiate it. Maybe we're scared to talk to our partner or talk to other people about it. Like, I don't know if there's a perfect answer for it, but just in my opinion, like, how do we go about initiating a healthy conversation about sex with somebody?
Anybody? Like, your kid, your friend?
Let's start with kid, and then let's go with partner.
Okay. I mean, okay. So sex positivity. Do you know what that is?
Yes.
Okay.
For those who don't know.
Okay. So for those who don't know, like, sex positivity, again, this is one of those things, Oprah aha moment, where like, understood what it was conceptually, didn't have the language until I'm in this program. I'm like, okay, that's it. That's me. That's what I am. And I've always been that. I like to think, okay, so sex positivity has a lot of components, and this, just like all things in sex, I think people don't understand it. So they tend to think like, oh, sex positivity means you're having sex with everybody. Like, no, that's not what it means. Doesn't mean you're just like, I have casual sex. There's nothing wrong with casual sex, but people just don't understand what it is. I like to see it in 3 parts, okay? Sex positivity, and just use this as the foundation for all conversations. I would say start here, okay? Sex positivity. Number 1, sex is not inherently shameful. So this dichotomy of you're bad if you do it and you're good if you don't, and you're dirty and you're clean, or you should be punished or rewarded if you don't, is man-made. You're socialized to think that. Wanting sex, desiring it, thinking about it, is a perfectly natural and healthy part of the human experience. So if you want to talk to me about sex, I'm not going to shame you. Okay? Like, nothing to be ashamed of here. Number two, sex serves multiple functions, one of which is pleasure. So this, like, sex is for making babies. We make babies, that's for sure, but that's reductive, and it reduces men to sperms and women to eggs. And when you talk about sex that way, sex is for procreation and blah, 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 you take the humanity out of human sexuality. We are pleasure-seeking people. That's a normal part of the human experience. We seek out pleasure in so many different ways: art, music, dance, sport, but why not sex? Okay, so sex serving multiple functions, one of which is pleasure, is again perfectly healthy and natural, and pleasure bonds us. So if sex is about pleasure, and not just about making babies, then it wouldn't confuse you that two women or two men want to do that. You understand that because it's a fun activity. And of course, women wanting to have sex and not wanting to be having a baby also doesn't puzzle you. Women having sex for pleasure is like, yes, okay, sex serves multiple functions. Number three, bodily autonomy is the most important thing, okay? So again, this dichotomy of dirty and clean doesn't exist. It's consent or no consent. So you are not about nothing, as far as sex is concerned, you are not good or bad. The only thing that makes you a bad person when it comes to sex is if you're forcing yourself on people. That's it. So what you decide to do with your body is the most important thing. And the decision to have sex and the decision not to have sex is a personal and private one. And you don't owe anybody any explanations or apologies for feeling either way. Both of those are valid because that's your body, okay? You get to do whatever you want with it. That's it. That's sex positivity. In my mind is the most important thing. Sex is not inherently shameful. Sex serves multiple functions. Your body, your choice. That's it. Okay. And I talking about sex with a child, like a kid, an adolescent, a teenager, I think those three components are extremely important, because if you're out there judging, they're not going to tell you anything. Okay. And that's the problem with parents, is that they're like, I want my kids to talk to me. But like, lots of well-intentioned parents are not thinking about those three things. You know, they're judging or really uncomfortable with the idea of their kids seeking out pleasure, even masturbating, which is an entirely victimless crime. You have blanket consent to your body, okay? Like, better you figure yourself out before you start, expecting somebody to figure you out. But as far as sex conversations with your partner is concerned, I don't like. Hopefully, the two of you are understanding those three components. That's the hope. It's not always the case. And I think if you're indoctrinating people into thinking, especially this paradox, this dichotomy of clean and dirty, particularly for women, and that's, I'm a woman and I have a lot of empathy for women, when you're told that, it's dirty, bad, don't wear this, don't do blah, 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 constantly policed. You're not even allowed to like sex and you get married and want to switch flips. It's just not like that. So I think keeping those three things in mind always when talking to anybody about sex, a friend, kid, a partner, but also like, if you believe in those three things, like you believe in it, then you are sex positive, and it's implied that you're not judging them. Like if it's your body and this is what you like, thinking about it this way, sex serves multiple functions, one of which is pleasure. Pleasure-based activities like masturbating, for example. Your partner, do you want them to masturbate? Do you want them to tell you what they do to themselves so that you can do it too? Like, are you that open-minded? That's a good thing. You know what I mean? So I guess like keeping those three things in mind and then trying to be as patient and non-judgmental as you possibly can. It's a difficult question to answer. I can give you the academic one with my 3 parts and build it on that foundation, but I mean, really, really listening to your partner. Like, do you know what it takes for them to feel heard? Like, I know that's a weird question, but not to like plug myself, but I made a worksheet. It's on my website. You can download it. It's free. It's totally free. It's just to build intimacy with your partner. And I sent it to a bunch of friends and even like followers and was like, hey, poke holes in this. And a big one was, I need to know that I'm heard, and there's certain ways that I need my partner to like, that's how I know that he or she or they are listening. So when you understand your partner, like what it feels for, like, for them to be heard properly, like you're not judging, you're patient, whatever, like that's how you're going to be able to have conversations about sex. Like, I am babbling, sex is rarely about sex, okay? Like, it's talk about the other side, like talk about how you feel, your alone time, your energy, like the things you like to do for fun, like talk about stuff like that. Like, sex, again, I know I'm like babbling, it's rarely about sex. There's usually other stuff going on. I totally didn't answer that.
No, that was a great. And
you're gonna have to edit some of the ramblings out.
I never.
Oh.
It's a podcast, that's what they're for.
Okay.
Just ramble away. It was really great. It had me. There's so many things I want to touch on, but I've already kept you a little longer than an hour. So maybe we'll have to do it again sometime. But until then, where do people find you? Where do they find After Sex Ed?
You can find me on Instagram at After Sex Ed. You can find me on my website at www.aftersexed.com. TikTok, which is my biggest base, I had to change my name because those fappers came for me. So I'm After SX Ed. So I took the E out, and that seemed to be okay because TikTok got super mad at me. But if you were to Google After Sex Ed with Sabrina, you find me pretty easily. And I have a YouTube channel as well, and I have a podcast. I'm on Spotify. I'm on all the stuff. But like I said, I tucked her in for a bit. She's sleeping. I think I'm going to resurrect her soon because that was my first love. I also have a journalism background, so this is a marriage of my two favorite things.
Love it. And we're so thankful to have you because as much as I love your TikTok, I love this conversation even more. So thank you very much for lending your time and expertise to this.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime.